Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's Firefighter Book Club. Today we'll be hanging out with Dr. Burton Clark. We have his book that we are reading this month, I Can't Save You, But I'll Die Trying. And we'll have an announcement on that here shortly. But the other thing that I want to make an announcement on is next month's book. We're still having a problem. We were going to do Les Carpluck's book from Canada, but we're having some shipping issues. So we're going to push his book back to next year sometime. I'm going to order a bunch of books at Red Helmet Training, and you'll be able to order them directly on the Firefighter Book Club website. And I was having a discussion with Chase Sargent, trying to have him be the substitute teacher, which is scary for the October book. We're going to do Buddy to Boss, hopefully. We're just trying to line up dates between me and the bad panda, Chase Sargent. So hopefully that will work. I think it will. Just want to get everybody aligned. So November, we'll be doing Firefighter Mentor, which is Murphy Arsenal's book out of, where is he at? Oh, he's down in New Orleans. So Murph will be on here in November. And then December, smaller book, because I need a break of reading all these books. Pretty thin, but this is called The Game. It's actually a very local guy. He's in Downey. He's an engineer there, but he wrote a book on basically like preparing for your years of probationary firefighter. And I know most of the people that are on the book club are not probationary firefighters, but want to kind of continue to like mentor our young firefighters coming up. So this has some pretty good insight in it on how to do that. This is one of the books that I always give out as a Christmas present if I have newer members on the department. If they've been on the job for longer, then I give them some other critical reading, but this is always the one that I give to probies. And then a couple other announcements. Just had one of my instructors here at Red Helmet Training get his book published. He's self-published, but this is actually one of my instructors here, Pat Wills. He teaches fire investigation here. He was the head investigator for Long Beach Fire Department, and he had a career fire where he had 3 kids die in a garage fire, and he was the lead investigator on that, and it was a garage that was converted into a living area. So this not only took a toll on him PTSD-wise, but also he went to the state legislature and actually worked on a process to not allow garages to be converted into living areas and some other stuff. So pretty interesting book. Don't know if we'll have it on the book club, but wanted to throw it out there. He literally just gave this to me last week, so I haven't had a chance to read it along with all the other books I'm trying to read. But so we'll throw that out there. And then last but not least, book-wise, if you have not seen it yet, John Norman just came out with his new book with giants, right? Working with giants. And I talked to John while I was at FDIC. Asked him if he'd be interested in being on the book club next year, and he said, of course. So we'll have John come on sometime next year. I'll line up dates with the book club next year. For next year, going into this next year, I'm still putting together the reading list. So if you have any suggestions, books that you'd like to see on there, and people that I can get a hold of as far as the authors, most of the guys I know, but if there's something you're interested in, PM me or send me an email, send me a text, whatever, and I'll see if I can squeeze it into next year. I know that I'm scared throwing this out there because Mike Richardson will probably have a ton of books that he's going to want on there. But the other thing that I want to throw out there as far as the reading list, speaking of Mike Richardson, we had a discussion the other day looking to move forward with another feature of the book club, which is more of a roundtable. Instead of discussing a certain book with an author, Mike's going to take the lead on this and actually do more of a meeting type concept and just talk about general books on like building construction and different aspects of the fire service and have it more of a meeting format like we kind of wanted to do at the beginning of this. So that's the plan going forward. If there's anything else that you'd like to see, by all means, like I said, send me a text, shoot me an email, whatever. If you can't find it on the internet, you're not looking hard enough. So, all right. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Clark. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. It's Bert.
I knew it was going to get to that, but I had to start it off respectfully.
That's okay. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So, welcome to the book club. Appreciate.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we were just talking about yesterday was your birthday, 72.
It was 72.
Young.
When I say it, I can't believe it, but yeah, 72.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good stuff.
Goes by fast, everybody. Enjoy every day, because next thing you know, you'll be 72. Yeah.
Well, we wanted to kind of go over some stuff in your book, and the big thing for me, reading your book and kind of having some interaction with you, I know personally that you're very passionate and you do a lot of research, which allows you to write the way you write. And these are a collection of essays that you've written over time during your time at the National Fire Academy, and some speeches that have kind of been converted into stuff, but very passionate about a couple of things. And I mean, literally firefighter safety, seatbelts, sprinklers, and higher education. I know those are like the four major things that you're passionate about. So, and unfortunately, sometimes in the fire service, all four of those things, there's people out there that don't believe that those are important. And I think that's your charge. So, let's talk about firefighter safety. What's some of the stuff that you cover in the book that's your key point?
I think it's important for me anyway, and for other folks. It's all about what's going on inside of you, right? Because all of us have experiences with people and events in our life, and it's how we react to that. I didn't publish my first article until I was 26 years old, right? So as you know, because I sent you the article about the fact that I'm dyslexic, reading and writing were not something I could do. So as a very young child with this learning disability, I was not at the head of the class. Dyslexics always feel different than everybody else because we learn differently, we see the world differently, and we internalize, for some reason, we internalize a lot of stuff because the outside world says we're not good enough, right? And that starts at a very early age for dyslexics. I can remember my mother telling my school to make me repeat the third grade because I couldn't read. So, and I had to repeat the third grade. Well, when you're in the third grade, you don't understand all that. You just think, well, nobody likes me. All right. And then you find out it's because you just can't read, you don't understand. And it was later on, she would say, and the school told me you had the highest IQ in the class. And that's why they didn't want to fail you. And she said, I don't care. He's got the highest IQ recruit. He can't read. And they took me to all kind of psychologists and psychiatrists. They thought there was something wrong with me, eyeglass checks, all kinds of things. So when a child is exposed to that, that influences their life forever. All right. And I was very lucky in that my mother very early on wanted me to learn how to swim. So she took me to the YMCA. And there's no reading and writing when you're in a bathing suit learning how to swim, right? And I was not that great of a swimmer. But on hindsight, what I realized, I'm 6'4". So I've always been the tallest kid in my cohort group. So when I was 5, I was the tallest 5-year-old. When I was 6 or 7, I was the tallest 6 or 7-year-old. So when I went to my learn to swim class, I was the tallest kid in class. And, I'd paddle around, do stuff. But there was a very unique thing about me in my swim class. I was the only kid in class that could stand in the shallow end of the pool and their head be out of the water. All the other kids were drowned if they tried to stand in the shallow end of the pool. So all of a sudden, I was very important because my head was above water. Right? I couldn't swim better than anybody else, but I could stand and my head would be out of the water. So what would happen, this is amazing. The instructors asked me, I couldn't swim any better than anybody else, but the kids after they came were shorter than even my class. They were younger. So the instructors asked me if I would mind staying after my class to help them with the next class. because I could stand up and I could hold the little kids. So I did. So now all of a sudden, in my regular school system, I was an outcast. I was never picked for anything. I wasn't good bouncing balls and throwing shit, because a lot of dyslexics don't have eye-hand motor coordination either. So I was never picked for anything first. I was the last kid to get picked for stuff. But at the YMCA now, I'm the important kid because my head's out of water. And instantly, I went from not important to very important because I can help hold kids up. And the fear of drowning is very innate in human beings. So those kids were happy to see me when I could hold them up. And I had to create this trust between them and me that I wouldn't let them drown. And the only thing I could do, I was just taller than they were, so I would help them. Anyway, that was looking back now, I think that was a very pivotal moment in my personal and professional development, because it made me very empathetic to other people's needs. It was pretty basic then. I don't want to drown, right? But you get that nonverbal sense when you see someone's face in terms of them thinking they're going to drown. So I became very sensitive to that. And also dyslexics are sensitive to those nonverbal cues. And so I developed that skill very early on of being sensitive. And I ended up being a lifeguard, a water safety instructor, a YMCA aquatic instructor. And by the time I was 18, I was running the entire Learn to Swim program at the Rollway YMCA. So that became my first profession, if you will, all right? Which had a lot to do with life and death. And one of the principal foundations of being a lifeguard or teaching swimming and teaching lifeguards is that the lifeguard is not supposed to exchange their life for the person they're trying to save. Right in the book, it says, when you've got to save somebody, if they are trying to drown you, which a drowning person will try to do, you are to back off, let them go unconscious, and then bring them in. You are not supposed to exchange your life for their life.
Right.
So when I got into the fire service by accident in 1970, it was wonderful. Not a lot of reading and writing, psychomotor. I gleamed onto it. I did it well. And but very early on, I learned you could get injured doing this. Burns, cuts. And whenever that happened, I realized it was my own responsibility or my own fault. And because I wasn't following the rules properly, something wasn't right. I didn't have the right equipment. I was not trained properly. So, and then the whole idea of dying doing this and seeing how the fire service responded to a firefighter dying as something heroic. When I looked at the data, even back then, something went wrong. It didn't seem to be heroic to me. So I think I brought that into the fire service with me, and that shaped my entire learning and practice of being a firefighter. That if I got injured, it wasn't part of the job, was because I didn't do something right, or I didn't know something, or I went outside of the norm. And when I saw my colleagues, the same thing happening to them, I thought, they shouldn't be doing that. But I wasn't in any position to say that because I wasn't an officer. I was at a fire one time, and a guy was on the roof, and he needed an axe. So he yelled down to somebody, "Throw me an axe." And the guy threw him an axe up to the roof. And I thought, how dumb is that? You're not supposed to throw an axe to a guy on a roof. That is in no book. There is no training manual say, throw the axe to the guy on the roof. But nobody said anything. And this was a career fire department. This was, these were what were thought to be smart guys. And I thought, that's not very smart. That is not very smart. So anyway, so those kinds of experiences kept happening. And I always felt as if there was more to learn. So I was the only guy on my company to go to college, and I took Professor Frank Browninger's classes, and they would give us school leave, and they would call us college kids and college boys. And so we were put down because we wanted to go learn shit. And it was like a significant emotional event. I was sitting in the day room, TV room, kitchen at a fire station, the career department, and we were arguing over about higher education. And everybody said, no, you don't need a degree to ride the back step. And I said, well, become more educated, maybe we'll kill fewer firefighters. And my lieutenant said, firefighters have to get killed as part of the job. And I was livid. I had never been so angry in my life. I'd been on the job about 6 years, I guess. But you can't punch your lieutenant in the face. Right? You can't do that. And at the time, I was taking a writing class. And so I went into the room and got the typewriter and started writing, because we had to turn in paper every week. So I typed this thing up. My anger it's coming out. I turned it in, and the professor said, "This is pretty good, Clark. You should try to get this published." And I was just astounded. And he said, "No, it's good." So I sent it off to Fire Command magazine, and a month or two later, they published it. And that's the first article in the book. I don't want my ears burned.
Right.
And I got letters, typed letters, handwritten letters through NFPA back to my house about people saying, "Yes, Clark, you're right. I buy into that." And it was magical. It was just unbelievable that I had all these feelings on the inside. I really had never shared them with anybody, and now I shared them, and I started getting this positive reinforcement. So that said, my idea is that we're not supposed to die. There's other people that agree with me. We're not supposed to get hurt. When we get hurt, something went wrong. It's not part of the job. So after that, I just continued with saying that message, but nobody else was saying it. It was like against the law to say firemen aren't supposed to get killed and injured. It was not part of our culture. So as time went by, I began to understand more and more of why it's that way, and that even society in general still see a firefighter's death as heroic. We just relived 9/11, 20th anniversary, right? That was a horrible, terrible thing to happen, but it shouldn't have happened, right? A lot of stuff went wrong when that happened. I can guarantee you those guys did not want to die. They did, but they didn't want to. So what message are we trying to send? That firefighters are supposed to die? That it's part of the job? I don't think any firefighter wants to die. We commemorate their life, but they wanted to live. Something went wrong that allowed the civilians and that firefighter to die. And if we don't change our culture about that, we're going to continue to do that in the 21st century, just like we did in the 20th century, because we're still stuck on that mantra that when a civilian dies, it's an act of God, and when a firefighter dies, it's part of the job. And that's why I wrote the book. We have to change that culture. So there you go. That's a long, I don't know if that's what you want me to say, but that's what I said.
No, I knew that's what you were going to say anyways, so that's good. And it's pretty amazing. I got trapped in a garage on a wildland fire 15 years ago, and that changed my entire perspective on what we do, why we do it, how we train. I actually started becoming an advocate for the Everyone Goes Home program after that. And one of the things that I realized with that Everyone Goes Home mantra is everyone goes home, but only after it hits home. Until you've had a close call, until you've had somebody close to you get severely injured or die in the line of duty, I think a lot of firefighters just don't believe it happens or it's not going to happen to them. And I always say, if I had to go to work every shift, kiss my wife and my kids and say goodbye and say, just so you're aware, I might not come home tomorrow, I guarantee my wife wouldn't let me do this job very long.
Right.
But she I think she can push it back in her mind that it's not going to happen. We do it all the time, but my wife knows, because I did get trapped in that garage and almost killed myself and my entire crew of 4, that it definitely can happen. And I think that all of us, I put together a video called "The Grim Reaper Rides Along," and it shows the Grim Reaper like they get a structure fire at the station, and the Grim Reaper's doing a ride along, and he gets in the fire engine and goes to fire with him.
Yeah.
And my thought process is the Grim Reaper is riding along with us every single day, and it's our job to keep that Grim Reaper from being able to do his job by us doing ours.
Yeah.
Well,
So you understand that, and a lot of people understand that. But then the next step is, okay, what is my responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen? Because when you look at firefighter fatalities or the NIOSH reports, there's something that allowed that person not to follow their own rules and regulations. Or there's something that allowed that building not to be up to the latest fire code. So even though he knew that, or she knew that, it wasn't enough to keep it from happening. So there needs to be, that's why you have to have that culture shift. Because another one of the most controversial articles I ever said is that we need to get rid of the term line of duty death. Because line of duty death, when you say that, says it kind of implies that it was our duty to die. We were doing something and getting killed as part of the job. Where all other occupations refer to an employee death or injury as occupational fatality, not a line of duty death.
Right.
Because when you use the term occupational fatality, it means that the boss or the organization is always 51% responsible for that employee's death because I control the employee's behavior. We don't hold fire departments accountable when a firefighter dies. We realize it was something that firefighter did, and it usually is because they violated their policy. But who let them violate their policy? The organization, because we didn't enforce that policy. If you're a male firefighter, or it doesn't matter what gender, if you touch another firefighter inappropriately, you can be fired on the first offense. But you can break all kind of safety rules and never get fired. So what message does that send about what's more important? They're both rules. One we enforce seriously, the other one we just let slide. So in my mind, that perpetuates this notion that a firefighter death is somehow heroic and part of the job. And that's a hard hill to get over. But if we don't get over it, now we don't have the same concept for cancer, right? We see cancer as a bad thing. Mostly every state has passed presumptive cancer laws that we will cover your medical benefits and death benefits if you die of cancer. But at the same time, still only 2 states in the District of Columbia have passed mandatory residential sprinkler ordinances for new construction. Right?
Right.
Why are we willing to spend our political capital on cancer after we get it, but not willing to spend our political capital on sprinkling everything so we don't get sick in the first place? Not only will it save us, but it'll save the citizens too. So, I mean, I hate to, I don't hate to, I have to be honest. This is how I see things. And this is what I think is the fundamental, because the fire service technologically is magnificent. It's so much better. Every 10 years, we have major jumps in our technology. But if we can't look at that underlying culture stuff, we're always going to be going to funerals, and then not fixing our behavior afterwards. So,
Well, and I think that, like you said, changing the culture. I think sometimes we even like fool ourselves into thinking that the public in the United States expects us to die too,
right.
and I think
Yes.
that becomes part of that problem. After that wildland fire, like I said, trapped in that garage, I have kind of that same sentiment when we're going out and we're defending homes in this wildland environment. That if I go to a medical call and a lady stubs her toe, before we leave that call, I literally have to go through this entire against medical advice form, have them sign it, say things like up to including death, like before I leave this, and freak this lady out that I'm like, up to including death if you don't want to go to the hospital. But we'll go to a residence and we're going to save their home. And if they're there, if we had like that same type of form, hey, I just need you to initial here that you understand that we're gonna try to save your home, and that you also need to initial here that there's nobody inside, everybody's evacuated the structure, and that we could get injured here, or we could die here. And if we die here, there's going to be a memorial out front, and we're going to come here every year on the anniversary. There's not a lot of people from the United States, the American public, that would sign those lines all the way down. We buy.
You got right.
We buy cars every day and buy houses every day, and they're just initialing, but I guarantee you on one like that, there's only going to be so far down that line that they're going to sign. And I think sometimes we kind of condition ourselves to think the American public expects us to go in there and save their stuff, and it's okay if we die.
Yeah. And they feel bad. All right. They feel bad when that happens because they know we're trying to save the community. But deep down, they really don't want us to die because they don't want to die in their house fire either. Nobody wants to die, and it really is changing that mindset. And so we are the ones that take the responsibility of changing that public's mind too. Okay. Because in reality, the house is probably insured, right? The house is insured. They couldn't build a house if it wasn't insured. And if they've evacuated, the only human risk is us. And you got to say, what are we trying to save? Is this a myth that we've been creating? I really do think that's the challenge, because and part of it is that society in general, we are stuck on this manual fire protection model. That when there's a fire, our principal go-to way of solving it is to put people on pumpers and ladder trucks to go fix the problem. Well, that's not going to sustain itself in the 21st century because they can create problems that none of us can solve. Because you can't have a 20-story building built out of wood and expect that it's not going to burn down sometime. I don't care what you do to it. But look at what's happening today. They're building more and more high-rise buildings out of wood. Right. We knew a long time ago that wood burns and it doesn't last 20, 30 years. But there's going to be firefighters that come on a job in 2050 that are going to be faced with these buildings, and they're going to be the derelict buildings that we have to go to today. Right. And so who's going to be the first firefighters to die in these buildings? Well, if we don't come out and say, look, if there's a fire in this building, we cannot save you. You have to make sure you're out of there. There's nothing that we have that can save you. We need to go to an automatic fire protection model because that's the only way it's really going to work, right? And we haven't been willing to tell that truth. That's tough.
Well, amazingly, we tell that truth publicly, but like at the station, it's like, I don't want sprinklers in the buildings. I like going inside burning houses.
but we put that in people's minds, right? We put that in people's minds. I was at a fire station years ago. I was making a video, and they were nice enough. We had dinner and all kind of stuff. So we probably spent about an hour and a half preparing dinner. Then we spent another hour eating dinner, another hour and a half cleaning up dinner. Right. So I had my book with me, and we talked about the book a little bit. And I said, yeah. And this station, these guys were like monsters. They must have had a bodybuilding club because they had all these weights out in the room. They had ropes to do. I mean, they were monster kind of guys. They had pictures of guys with muscles all over the house. So I said, in a 24-hour shift, how many hours do you spend going out checking smoke detectors in your first due area? And they said, well, we're too busy. We can't do that. I said, well, wait a minute. We've just spent about 5 hours having a meal. You can't find 60 minutes in every day to go knock on doors and check smoke detectors. I said, no, we're too busy because they're pumping iron and doing all this stuff. So they see that other stuff as more important than making sure that their community has working smoke detectors. Well, we put that in them from day one at the rookie school. And then we keep repeating that. How many medals of honor do we give out for the companies that inspect the most number of smoke detectors? Well, if we don't reward it and recognize it, then why do we expect them not to think it's valuable? Because the rest of us don't value it.
Right. Yeah, one of the things I just recently did on my engine company, we just added a public relations kit on the engine, which we didn't have any of that stuff on there before, but helmets and stickers for the kids. But I got several smoke detectors donated. We got a bunch of batteries, 9 volts. And, even if you're not going to set aside time to go do it, you can still do it on every call you run.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some fire departments have started that process. Like when they got on an EMS run, not only will they have them sign off, but then somebody will go check and make sure they got work on smoke detectors. And if they don't, they'll notify somebody, or the ambulance will give them one or install one or send the engine company out to install one. Right. I mean, that's if our job is to really, protect life and property, we can't do it sitting at the firehouse. We can't do it racing to the alarm, because once the alarm comes in, the damage has already started. We may be able to mitigate it some, but the damage has already started. And we need to change our fundamental understanding of our duty from manual fire protection to automatic fire protection, and see that smoke detector as just as important as any piece of equipment that's on the apparatus, or that standpipe connection as just important as anything in our standpipe bag. Because how many times you get to a standpipe connection, you can't connect to it, or something's wrong with it. Right. That's there for our tool. And do we see that as our responsibility? And I don't think we're there. We're pumping iron, but
well, there's a lot of guys on CrossFit. I'm on CrossFat, so it's okay.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't be in shape. It's okay being in shape, but you have to decide what's the most critical thing that you do. What do you spend your most time doing? And that tells you a lot about your value system.
Well, we go back to the line of duty deaths, where a lot of them are cardiac related. So obviously that staying physically fit is important in that respect. But even when you went back to the line of duty death term, this was a big thing when I talked about everyone goes home, where we said, okay, we need to reduce our line of duty deaths from 100. We're trying to reduce them by 50% over the 10-year period since Tampa, and they did that. But one of the things I always talked about is we're comparing apples to oranges. If you're comparing our 100 deaths to other countries out there, well, those other countries don't account the same line of duty deaths that we do. We can have a firefighter die of a cardiac arrest 24 hours after he went off shift, and we count it as a line of duty death, where they're not. So our numbers look much bigger than all the other countries because we kind of tabulate other things into there. But if you look at firefighter deaths in a lot of those countries, they're not also dying in fires, because most of those countries don't go inside unless they actually have a report of somebody inside. And they do a lot more firefighting from the outside than we do in the United States.
Our data is terrible in terms of what we do, because even the fact that if we're only measuring the actual injuries or fatalities, something led up to that. So the real way to fix it is to make sure we are performing every task 100% right 100% of the time. That's a foundation of any real true profession, that we admit when we make a mistake or we do something in error or we weren't trained properly and we fix it. And there's two groups that I look at. I look at the airline industry and then also the medical industry, in that they use the best science they can. People die of medical error and people die in plane crashes. But when you look at their investigation as to why that happens, it's much more detailed than ours. The 737 MAX aircraft, the two of them that ran into each other and they grounded them for almost a year. I mean, they went back and they looked at everything from an engineering standpoint and then also how they trained the pilots. And what they realized, principally, there was an engineering problem, but they didn't train the pilots the same way they had been training them before. They didn't have enough practice time, and they didn't teach them what to do when that piece of equipment failed. Their normal training is what caused them to crash. If they had the new training, they would have been able to get out of it. So they realized that there was human error, but that human error was put in them by the system that didn't train them properly. So every one of ours is like that too. If you went back and did the soul searching about your incident where you got into that building, something went wrong. There was something in how you were trained, but how much actual investigation or soul searching, not to blame you, but to find out how did the system let you down to put you in that position? I would probably say very little. Certainly much less than if there had been a fatality, because we only look at those things when there's a death. And then we're so wrapped up in the emotion of it, we can't separate the emotion from finding out what really did go wrong. Not blaming you, but making that organization 51% responsible, because somehow we let you get into that situation. That's what needs to be fixed. And we're nowhere near close enough to that.
Right.
Nowhere near.
Yeah, and luckily for my incident, I've done a lot of research into it, and it's one of the big things that I teach on today is some of that crew resource management from the aviation industry. You bring up Chief Brunacini in the book several times, and one of my favorite conversations I had with Bruno, we were talking about two engineers at my fire station playing a little prank war back and forth, and it all started because one engineer left all the lights and the sirens and the windshield wipers on the engine when he went off duty that day. So the first time this engineer comes in, turns the batteries on, the fire engine goes crazy. And we're talking about stuff like that, about normalization of deviance, and it's the deviance, right?
Yeah.
So Bruno says, he goes, all right, Jesse, so you fly to go teach at conferences and all these types of things. Let's say that you're getting on a plane, and as you get on the plane, they greet you onto the plane, whatever airline you're flying, and inside the cockpit, there's a pilot and a co-pilot in there, and you can see them running through the checklist. And the co-pilot starts flipping on some switches, and then all of a sudden, the windshield wipers start going crazy on the plane, and all these buzzers start going off. He's like, how comfortable would you be getting on that plane? And of course, the co-pilot looks at the pilot and says, freaking B shift. You know,
right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
He goes, but
right.
That's the difference between the aviation industry and us.
Right.
We are a life-saving organization. So why would we think that type of thing is okay? It was one of my, I mean, literally that conversation lasted for like an hour.
Yeah.
Just one of my favorite conversations with Bruno on that type of mentality.
Right. It goes back to, what does it mean to be a professional? Right. So I think our definition of being a professional is not up to the same standard as other professions. Right. It's just not. We want it to be, but it's not. And there's lots of reasons for that. One, where my old professor Frank Brannigan said the fire service is 32,000 chiefdoms, with nobody in charge of them. Whereas most professions have a hierarchy that you have to report to. If you're a paramedic, you have to report to your medical director. Your medical director has to report to somebody else. You can be held accountable for your practice as a paramedic, but nobody holds you accountable for your practice as a firefighter. Where are you most likely to injure yourself and others as a firefighter. When you're a paramedic, the only person you can really injure is the patient, most likely.
Right.
So we are not even close to getting to that level of professionalism. We like to say it because we get paid to do it, but that doesn't make us, I say that, the Boy Scouts are more organized than we are because, they have a national system, right? We don't have a national system. We have all these hodgepodge kinds of things that really nobody's in charge of. And that's part of our challenge. And it's not about volunteer career. I'm not talking about that.
Right.
It's about, because even as a volunteer paramedic, you are still held to the same standard. Right. So, yeah.
Well,
Anyway, that's a long drawn out thing. So writing was not my normal way of doing things, but whenever I had some kind of significant emotional event, I learned to write about it. And that's what ended up being all the stuff that I've written. And I've always, writing a book was always on my bucket list, but I never knew what to write it about. And then it was actually after Billy Goldfeder's book about Pass It On came out. That was a series of essays. Then I read the book by I keep forgetting this guy's name. He's a political commentator. He passed away, but anyway, and his book was a series of his essays that he put together. So I said, wow, maybe all the shit that I wrote could be put together in a book. And sure enough, that's what it did. And there's actually a name for it. It's called an anthology. When you put a bunch of different little things together, it's called an anthology. So Pass It On is an anthology written by a bunch of authors, or an anthology can be written by one author, a lot of his stuff. And so the design of it, I had 4 of my buddies read everything I ever wrote and pick out the 40 best. And then I added 5 more, and a book is born, and there you go. So, and it's been well received. One of the best compliments I ever had, a guy said to me, he said, Bert, I don't read a lot, but he said, I read your book. I keep your book in my bathroom. I can read one essay about the time it takes me to take one dump. So that's when he reads my book, when he's in the bathroom taking a dump. I mean, okay. You can't get a better recommendation from a firefighter than that, right? Yeah. He said they're short, they're sweet, they're to the point. I don't have to keep flipping back and forth. And he said, in about 45 days, I'll have your book finished. So, I mean, that's. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and you had Raul on part of your team, kind of like.
Yes.
So that's always good stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yep. Even the people I picked out, they were significant individuals in my life that impacted me dramatically, and so it was a love affair. It was very nice. Yeah.
So I guess I'll get you all spun up a little bit more here. We'll go back to the Boy Scout thing. I guess what we need badges, and you can get one if you actually wear your seatbelt.
Yeah. Well, I tried to do that with a seatbelt pledge. That is such a corny kind of thing, but even that was because as soon as we had seatbelts, I started wearing my seatbelt. I don't know why, right? But then when Brian Hutton, who was a fire academy student, about 6 months after he had been at the fire academy, when he died, that was a significant emotional event in my life because Brian, he wasn't my student, but he had come to the fire academy and taken our firefighter health and safety and survival class, and then went back and fell out of his fire truck because he didn't have a seatbelt on. And I mean, I literally cried sitting at my desk thinking all this great stuff we're doing at the fire academy, but we let Brian down. How is it that we let Brian down? And that's when I started writing about, because the seatbelt thing helped me understand a lot of more culture problems because it is such an obvious behavior kind of thing. And it's both technical, social, political, economic, all those kind of things. And yet we couldn't get that right. So I started calling that out to shock people, to get them to do some self-analysis. And I started, again, getting positive feedback for the writing that I did and the lecturing I did on it. And people started wearing their seatbelt and then telling me their stories about how they had to change their behavior. And it's all about behavior change. And Yeah, so there's a seatbelt chapter in the book. Because if we can't get seatbelts right, what makes us think we'll get anything right? And you still see firefighters being injured or dying or falling out of their fire trucks because they don't have their seatbelts on. So how many other things are not going correctly on that company? And again, I'm not blaming those guys, but there's 3 or 4 people on a fire truck. And if we're all responsible for making sure we get our seatbelt on, we're not really holding each other accountable, are we? We're not being responsible. We're not doing our job. We're not very professional. My partner at the academy, Chuck Burkell, he tells the story. He was flying over to Paris with his wife, and when he got in his seat, literally there was no seatbelt in his seat. It had been taken out for some reason, but he looked for it, couldn't find it. The stewardess came out, couldn't find it. The pilot came out, couldn't find it. Finally, they stopped the flight, or they canceled. They held up the flight, called in a maintenance person to come in and put a seatbelt in there so they could take off. Right? That's how you have to make sure your seatbelt policy is really upheld. And one of the most significant examples of success of that, it happened in Amarillo several years after Brian's death. They took the pledge, they got involved, and this lieutenant, they got a call for an alarm, and for whatever reason, the guy in the back, he said, "Lou, I can't get my seatbelt." And the lieutenant got out, looked real quick, couldn't find it, said, "Okay, you stay here." And they left the guy on the ramp and went to the call. Right? How many officers would be willing to do that? Now, on the surface, it may look small, but it wasn't very long after that. A company was responding on a snowy night. They rolled the apparatus. Everybody had their seatbelt on. They all walked away. So, I mean, it's such a little thing, but there's so many pieces to make sure that we get that simple behavior 100% correct 100% of the time, because the consequences of not doing so could be a matter of life and death.
Well, and I think there was a portion in the book that you talked about, you were even challenged where people on an engine that you were riding along with weren't wearing it. And you struggled with, do I say something? Do I not say something? And I think that's the hard part. I mean, even as a company officer, you have firefighters that aren't wearing it, and you want to be one of the crew, and that's the hardest part. As an engineer, I had a captain that wasn't wearing it. And so I finally brought him off to the side and I said, "Hey, what's going on? Why aren't you wearing your seatbelt? I've had to tell you multiple times now to get your seatbelt on before we go on calls." And crazy enough, he says to me, "Well, I believe that God has a plan for me." And I said, "So you would go skydiving without a parachute?" It's crazy to me that that was his thought process. But the way that I actually fixed that was I actually brake checked him into the windshield once, and then he started wearing it. So, but
yeah. But the point is, as a profession, you don't get to make those decisions. You can't use God as your excuse for not doing something, right? He may say, "I don't want to wear my SCBA into a burning building either." Right. But then we're responsible for paying his medical insurance kind of stuff. I mean, so those kind of things, professions get around that kind of stuff. That's one of the things about professions. You can have your own beliefs and stuff, but you have to conform to this policy and procedure, or you just have to go find another place to work. Can you imagine a physician saying, "I am not going to work on this patient because of their skin color or their ethnicity or their gender or their sexual preference"? Society wouldn't accept that. Right? Why? So because that's a profession. Society holds the medical profession to that higher standard, or the legal profession to that higher standard. Right? We should hold ourselves to those kinds of standards, and it's not easy, but it's doable. It is doable because firefighters are smart. And the seatbelt's a perfect. I will bet you that guy wears his seatbelt in his own car, and he makes his kids put on his seatbelt. Right?
Yeah.
So something, when he crosses that threshold, walking into the firehouse culture allows him to think that. And there's actually a story similar to that in the book. There was a driver that did not wear his seatbelt, and a new company officer put him on charges. So, and the battalion chief came and said, "Yep." And the guy was put off on days off for not wearing a seatbelt. He got over that, came back. I guess maybe he wore a seatbelt for a while, but he got a new officer. And obviously, the new officer did not hold them to the seatbelt standard. It wasn't long after that engine was involved in a crash. Nobody on the engine had their seatbelt on. The officer was ejected and died. The officer was ejected and died. The wife sued the department because she found out that this driver had, been disciplined for not wearing seatbelts. And the Supreme Court in that state said that the wife could not sue the department because her dead husband would have been eligible for workman's comp. And that made the department exempt from being held accountable or liable.
Wow.
So the law gave permission to kill that firefighter, and nobody held accountable for it. All right. So, I mean, and again, I'm not blaming anybody on that fire truck. It's the system that allowed that to happen, compared to the airline industry that upheld the flight until they could fix the seatbelt for my buddy Chuck.
Right.
Or the Amarillo Fire Department that told the guy, get out, and went to the call and then come back because that was the right decision to do. I mean, that's so. And it's all between our ears, it's all between our ears, and we can make decisions, or other people can make decisions for us. People don't smoke in the firehouse anymore, do they? When we came on the job, they smoked in the firehouse.
Right.
No more. You want to smoke, you got to go outside. Right? No matter what God says, you can't smoke in the firehouse anymore.
Right.
Right. So we know how to change behavior if we choose to change it. There were no women firefighters. Now there are women firefighters all over the place. You don't think we made that happen, do you? No. Society made that happen to us because that became the norm of society. When society decides that firefighter death is not part of the job, whether it's from cancer or falling through a floor or getting caught in a garage or dying at a brush fire, we'll stop that. But we have to tell them this is not supposed to happen. And that's hard. That's not easy. That thrill, that machoism is what makes us different than other kinds of professions. I'm guilty. I'm proud of being a firefighter. I went through the battles. I fell through a floor. I've been burned. I've been hurt. It's like a battle scar. It's a red badge of courage stuff. No, it may feel that way, but the reality is I messed up. I did something wrong. Something failed. Something went wrong. It's not heroic. So anyway.
Well, and we know things do go wrong. And then obviously now we talk about rapid intervention crews or rapid intervention teams. And I told you before that my introduction to Burton Clark was calling the mayday. I saw the videos that came out, and as the training officer at the time, I built all the props. We didn't have the fun noodles. We actually used all of our aluminum cans of recycling that we had already. And
oh wow, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so
that works. Yeah,
collapse prop that actually
cantilevered
over, and we actually added another thing that when the floor collapsed and you dumped into these aluminum cans, you called the mayday. We actually threw a piece of plywood over the top of the prop, and then they had to lift the floor back up and crawl out underneath that floor out.
Great.
and there was some
yeah.
drywall breach and
Yeah,
But,
great. Yeah.
prop and great
Yeah.
class. So that was
Yeah.
really cool.
And that I'll tell you the backstory because I always love the backstory of shit. So I had done all the research, and one of my classes we experimented, and so I came up with the ideas. I said, okay, I want to get somebody snagged on something like they can't move forward. I want to get them lost in the room, can't find their way out. I want to drop like a chain link fence on them, and then I want to fall. But I couldn't figure out fall through the floor without hurting somebody. I kept rolling my mind, and I had my grandkids out to lunch at McDonald's, and they were jumping into the ball pit. And I thought, if kids can jump into a ball pit, I can drop firefighters into a ball pit.
Right.
And it went from there, and that idea went worldwide. I mean, it was just amazing. But even that, I don't know if the backstory to that was, we've known about Mayday for a long time. Actually, I think I was at an FDIC when somebody talked about RIT teams for the first time. I think they were out of New Jersey. That a special team would be designated to soften the building, and they would be there especially to go in for firefighters that need help if they called a Mayday, right? So all of us went out and we had RIT training and bought the RIT bag and all that kind of stuff. And I was a captain on a truck company, and I had a training captain. So I had done Mayday drills, but we always said to a guy, okay, you call Mayday, and then we exercised the RIT team. So now I'm at this warehouse fire, and it's a large warehouse. There's a metal dip plating plant, and we came down there to relieve because it was second operational period. Nobody had been in the building yet. The dip room had been high foamed, and now we were all going to go in a room. And I had like 6 guys, so I split my crew, myself and a sergeant and the guys, and they were supposed to do something. Anyway, I lost track of them, and I tried to call them on the radio, but they didn't answer. And I tried again. I thought, should I call a Mayday? I said, no, not really. It's not that bad. So anyway, later on, they had been told to do something else. I thought, why didn't I call Mayday? And I went back and I realized although I had exercised the RIT process, I had never been faced with the actual decision-making of calling a Mayday. That decision-making had never been put in front of me. So that's when I went on this campaign to figure out, well, none of the books tell you exactly when to call. They say when the firefighter's life is in danger, that kind of shit. But there's no specific step-by-step, and I'd never practiced it. So I can literally remember sitting in my office one day with my feet up, looking out the window. This is how your tax dollars were spent. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, fighter pilots, when they're taught to eject from an aircraft. How that came to me, the only thing I can think of is years before that, I had been at an air show, and a stealth fighter was there. And on his last run, he took off and a piece of the wing fell off, and he had to actually eject. So I actually saw somebody eject from an aircraft.
Wow.
So I went and found out, and that's when I found out that the military has this complete training package on teaching pilots when to eject, how to do it. They actually had props you have to sit in. It's a skid that throws you up in the air, all kinds of stuff. So I thought, that's for us. And I just took that model and just put firefighters calling Mayday on top of it, and it worked brilliantly. And then wrote it up and printed it and wrote about it and tested it in the field. And next thing you know, and now it's even funnier, but because when I was doing it, then I got a note from my buddy saying, look, NFPA standard says firefighters aren't supposed to call Mayday because it will interfere with airplanes and ships at sea.
Right.
And I thought, wait a minute, how the hell is that possible? But sure enough, it was in the NFPA Mayday standard. It says firefighters can't use the word Mayday. So after we did our first class, my boss gets a letter from Firescope. That's your outfit, right? Firescope.
Yeah.
Telling them to tell Burton Clark he can't use the word Mayday because the Firescope manual says firefighters aren't allowed to use Mayday because Firescope has airplanes and boats.
Right.
So, but what Firescope didn't know is that I had written to the National Urban Search and Rescue Committee and showed them the NFPA standard And the federal government said, no, there's no prohibition of firefighters using the word mayday. Anybody can use it. It's a different channel. And even if we hear it, that's okay, we'll help. So I had this letter. So when I got called into my boss's office saying, Clark, you have to stop teaching mayday, I handed my boss the letter. He read it and he said, oh, I guess you can use the word mayday. I say, yes, I can. Thank you, sir. And we kept on doing it. And the boys at Firescope must have been spinning that day when we didn't pay attention to them and kept doing it. But it took 10 years after that to get NFPA to change their standard. And the only reason that happened is because the IAFF had created their fireground survival class,
Right.
with a FEMA grant, a DHS grant. And guess what term they used in their material? Mayday.
Yeah.
So now the IAFF was in disagreement with NFPA. So it was the IAFF that finally got NFPA to change the standard to allow firefighters to call Mayday. But it took 10 years for that to happen.
Well, sometimes progress is slow, but
And just because I didn't know when to do it, and I was tenacious enough to do the research, to write about it, and to keep it in front of people, and it eventually changed. You know, I mean, I think change is possible, but somebody has to have the courage to stand up to the system and say, no, put your seatbelt on. It's okay to call Mayday. We're going to practice doing it. And that when a firefighter dies, it's not a line of duty death, it's an occupational fatality. These are not that radical, but the response sometimes, because I'm going against the norm. And anytime you go against the norm, you have this kind of pushback.
well, it is definitely a pleasure to have you on here today. And I know that it is a combination of you being at the National Fire Academy and seeing just the variables that you saw there, the higher education that you have,
Yep.
and your dyslexia that has put you in a position to research and look at root causes of and defining how we look at stuff. That has brought us here today with you and your book. And I can't say thank you enough for being on the show. I'm going to turn it over to the audience and see if they have any questions and go from there.
Don't let me forget to make the announcement at the end.
Oh, announcement. Yes, please. Let's do that. Let's make the announcement.
We'll do that now.
Wrap up and turn over to the rest of the crew.
Okay. And I thought this is the perfect place to announce it. I'm coming out with a new revised edition of my book. Because I just celebrated my 50th anniversary in the fire service. And I've changed in that past 5 years or 6 years, 7 years I've been retired. So probably one of the most significant changes is the title of the book. The present title of the book is I Can't Save You, But I'll Die Trying. The new title of the book will be I Can't Save You and Don't Want to Die Trying. Because after turning 70, you know, I have to have the courage to tell my truth. And my truth is no firefighter ever wanted to die doing the job. And that is not to disrespect anybody that's died, but we're not soldiers. We are not soldiers. As much as we want to think we are, there's no enemy trying to kill us. There's no hostile environment. There's no hostile. We are not a political force of a country. We are there to protect people and the environment. And us dying is not part of that formula, I don't think. It can't be. Not to say that it won't happen, but when it does, something went wrong. And we need to do everything we can to keep it from happening. That's really the only way we honor those that have died. And it's tough. And I'm changing. I wish I had the picture of it, but I'm changing the cover of the book. I struggled with putting the Fallen Firefighters Memorial on the front cover of the first book. But it did. It impacted me every day. When I went to work every day for 30 years, the flags were down most of the time. And that's not supposed to happen. All right. But at the same time, there has to be something else that we strive and hold up as our highest level of achievement and our most important contribution. And dying can't be our most important contribution because something went wrong. So the new cover of the book will be the other rock or memorial that's on the campus of the National Fire Academy that very few people even know about or recognize. They walk by it sometimes, but it's the National Fire Academy dedication rock in front of the E building. It was laid October 8th, 1979 to commemorate the dedication of the National Fire Academy by President Jimmy Carter. And the inscription says, to enhance the professional development of the fire service and others engaged in fire prevention and control activity. So that's what I spent most of my life doing at the Fire Academy. Even from day one, coming on the job, I tried to increase my own ability because I always knew I had to do better. So that's the message I want to send, that for the 21st century, we have to do better. And all of our iconography and photographs and things that we hold to the highest esteem, that's all part of it. And so anyway, it may not sell books, but it's the message I want to send, and it's my truth. So that's the cat out of the bag, if you will. And hopefully that book, I just went through the galleys yesterday, and what it is, I've added some 14 additional essays to the book that I've written since I've retired. The chapters are still the same. And I put the essays in descending order. In other words, my newest essays are up front and the oldest essays are down the bottom. So what that kind of shows, the newer essays are my conclusions that I've come to in those kinds of areas. Culture, seatbelts, mayday, higher education, best practices, and then finally essays. And the ones under it are the foundation as to why I've come to that conclusion. So there's a lot to be said for how things are presented, right? The first book was my journey. This book is my arrival, if you will, and how I got there. So I thought there's no better place to announce that than the people that actually read the first book. And I felt bad that you had to read that book when had been working on this new one, but there was nothing I could do about it. And it won't hurt you. So the new book will be out, and we'll make sure the readers get a discount somehow through your bookstore. But that's it. So that's my big announcement. And thank you for letting me make that.
Yeah, of course. I guess when I called you several months ago to be on the book club, you could have told me then you were writing a new edition.
Yeah, I know. I felt bad, but it wouldn't have been fair, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm not expecting you to die trying to save all of us, but I know that it's cost you a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this fire service and what you're trying to do. And so again, I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to the guys that are always here every month, it seems like. So,
hi guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging in there.
All right. Well, thank you very much once again. And hopefully I'll get to take you out for some ice cream sooner or later when I'm
Yes. Well, it depends on what weather it is. We may have to go out for soup if you're here January to February. But I also like I appreciate that we can use milkshake.
Yes.
So I saw that story about milkshake. I thought, oh, that's great, because I like milkshakes better than I actually like ice cream cones. So
soon enough, my friend.
Thank you for giving me that option.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. See you.
Thanks,
next
everybody.
month. As soon as I find a date for Chase, we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right.
See you in Columbus, Jesse.
All right. See you soon. Thanks.